Hello, welcome to our coding and robotic class on Arduino programming. Today we are diving into control statements, specifically the if and the if-else statements, which are fundamental for decision making in your code. Starting with the if statement, this allows your Arduino to make decisions based on conditions. An if statement will have a condition to be tested, and the result coming from the tested condition will determine what happens next. The condition is a Boolean expression, meaning it evaluates to either true or false. If the condition is true, the code inside the then section will run. Otherwise, the Arduino microcontroller will skip the code. Let's see a practical example. We are going to use a LED connected to pin 9. We want the LED to turn on when a button is pressed. The button is connected to digital pin 2. Notice that the button physically has 4 pins, but technically a button has 2 pins. This is because these 2 pins are joined together internally, making them a single pin or terminal. And also, these 2 pins are connected internally. Likewise, take note that only one terminal of the button is connected to digital pin 2, while the other pin is connected to ground. Let us then go back to the ArduBlock software and program the LED to turn on when the button is pressed. Alright, the first thing to do is to come to structure, and then we pick our setup and loop block. Okay, since we want our code to run repeatedly, we are going to put our code inside the loop section of the block and not the setup section. Okay, because code put in setup section will only run once. Alright, so the next thing to do is to check if the button is pressed. For us to be able to do this, we need to come to logic, and then we go for the if then block and put it inside the loop. Alright, so the logic is we check if the button is pressed. Now, if the button is pressed, checking whether the button is pressed is the condition you are trying to check. Okay, so the condition will be put inside the if line of the code. Alright, so for us to check if the button is pressed, we come to input sensors. Remember, a button is an input component. Okay, so come to input sensor, then we get this block, digital module button pin 2. Alright, then we drop it. We are not putting it inside yet, okay, because if the button is pressed, then the microcontroller will see whichever pin we are using to connect that button as 0. But when the button is not pressed, then that pin keeps returning 1. So the task is to check if a particular pin we are using is bringing 0 or is bringing 1. So for us to check that, we come back to logic, then pick this block r is equals to 10, put it in here. Okay, now this R, where we have this R, we are going to put digital module button block like that. Okay, so pin 2, we are still using pin 2 for our button, so that one will remain unchanged. Now we are checking if pin 2 is equals to 0, so then we change to 0. Okay, then we have that. Alright, so right now this line is checking if any button connected to pin 2 is pressed or not. Alright, so if it is pressed, what should happen? A LED should come on. So come to output sensors, then we get module, digital module LED. Now our LED is attached to pin 9 and not 13, so we change 13 to 9, and that's it. Okay, so that's the end of the code. Right now, if you upload the code and you press the button, you should see the LED coming on and staying on. Alright, it comes on and stays on. Okay, so at this point, if you upload this code, then when you press your button, you should see the LED coming on and staying on. Alright, the next thing we can do is trying to make the LED turn off when the button is not pressed. That is, if the button is pressed, then the LED should be on, and when it is not pressed, the LED should be off. Alright, in order to do that, all we have to do is just to click on this icon, and then we are going to have, let's shift this up, we are going to drag this else statement, else block, into the if block like this. Okay, then we are going to have the if then else block. Alright, so now what this one is saying is, if digital module button pin 2, that is a button attached to pin 2, is pressed, that is when it will be equals to 0, right? Is pressed, then digital module LED pin 9 should be on. Okay, so you have our LED on pin 9, should be on. Alright, otherwise, which means else, it should be off. Okay, So all you have to do is just to duplicate this, or you can get back to output sensor and pick it again, but it's faster you do it this way. Just duplicate, then bring this under here. Now this time around, this time we'll do LED pin 9 will be off. All right, so that's it. Now we have the if then else block. Okay, so which means if this condition is true, that is if the button is pressed, then the LED will be on, LED on pin 9 will be on. Else, that is if the button is not pressed, then what should happen? The LED on pin 9 will be off. All right, so that's control statements for you. We have the if then we have the if then else. I mean, we have the if then block and we have the if then else block. All right, so that's that. You can actually use this to make various decisions in your code. This condition can be if an obstacle is detected. You understand? It can basically be anything you can imagine. Okay, and what will happen if the condition is true can also be anything. You can say instead of LED, let's say a motor should start rotating, or you have a servo motor. We have another motor called servo motor. A servo motor should move to a specific angle. All right, so basically this is the kind of logic that is being used in automatic doors at supermarkets, whereas when someone's approach, then the doors open. Else, when someone is not approaching, the door remain closed. Okay, we've looked into control statement basically, and we've studied the if statement, that is the if then statement, and the if then else statement. All right, so see you in the next class, and until then, keep practicing and stay great. Thank you.